Welcome to another ASTQB podcast. We're joined today by Mike Sowers, and I'm excited to have Mike join us because we're going to talk about how to lead in testing. We're going to specifically get into leadership advice for test managers and perhaps more importantly, for those who hope to become test managers. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Dave. Great to be with you today. Hope you're doing well. Hope the audience is doing well. I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have today.
You know, this is a great topic. I see lots of questions, not only coming into ASTQB specifically, but also on various forums where people are asking, how do I progress in software testing? How do I build my career? What should I do next? And I think there are lots of, lots of advice that's out there. I think that in this case, we're going to one of the true experts because you have such experience in this industry. You've seen a lot. You've talked to a number of people through the through education, through trade shows and whatnot. So let's give the audience, I think, a little feel for your experience and background to give greater context and, in my mind, weight to the importance of your thoughts. So give us a little experience and background here, Mike.
Yeah, sure. I think you're the young guy in the room, Dave. Believe it or not, I've got
And
about
I'm 98 years
three.
old, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got about 3 decades in IT, and who would have thought that a guy from the Midwest that grew up in farm country would have the privilege and blessing of being a senior leader in the area of software quality and testing. I actually started my career in hardware testing, which is how I got into testing right out of college as a co-op student. Then moved to the software side, and took on accountabilities in testing and software development, things like infrastructure and release engineering and configuration management. Worked in direct contributor roles, project leader roles, manager roles, and then eventually executive roles in testing. So, from a co-op student to an executive VP in a large financial firm, looking back on that, I just never would have imagined that I could have attained or would have had the privilege of attaining those types of roles. And of course, now here at Coveros, I'm wearing many hats. I actually lead our line of training business. I get to work with senior leaders and practitioners, as you said, doing some mentor coaching and consulting through our various interactions with them, whether it be on site or at our conferences. And then I also do the technical programming for our STAR conferences, which I think your listenership knows about.
mm-hmm.
We hold those on the West Coast, East Coast, and in Canada 3 times a year. So that's a little bit of my background and context and journey. Software testing has been just a very rewarding career for me.
No, that's really helpful, and in fact, I hope people look for ASTQB at some of the upcoming STAR conferences as well. I know that's a big deal for us, and actually we love seeing the various software testers out there, certified and not certified, who have questions, and it's just nice to kind of build those relationships out there. So it's nice to get some human interaction. All of these podcasts are great.
Absolutely.
So Mike, I want to try and make sure that everyone has a feel for. Well, one of the beauties of certification is it helps to have the same nomenclature, the same vocabulary, if you will. And in this conversation, I want to actually try and get a feel for what is your definition of leadership as we're going to focus on this discussion.
Sure. Well, first of all, Dave, I'd say it's evolved, right? I've had some great mentor and coaches along the way. Had some not so good ones as well, but mostly, great ones. And one CIO I work for challenged me to really step back and think deeply about this question. and then actually write it down. His guidance was that great leaders must formulate and live out their personal understanding of leadership, which I thought was a very
Hmm.
good challenge to me as a upcoming leader. And so as a result, I maintained and refined my own definition of leadership for over a decade. And for me, leaders champion teams toward a common purpose, stellar results, and shared rewards. So that's kind of my elevator speech.
No, I love that.
Leaders champion teams towards common purpose, stellar results, and then shared rewards. And then underneath that short elevator pitch, I've identified some key leadership attributes to keep in front, to keep front and center that I want to aspire to. A leader leads. A leader develops other leaders. A leader affirms and inspires. A leader is flexible and adaptive. A leader is courageous, and finally, a leader is worth following. Those are high-level statements, but they resonate with me because I've researched them, I've adopted them, I've tried to internalize them, and of course, live them out.
Yeah, no, that is powerful stuff, and I love the clarity of it. I think it really resonates. But one of the things I noticed in there, I don't necessarily think I heard the word manager. And I suppose that not every manager is necessarily a leader, although hopefully they are. But not every leader maybe has to be a manager. What is there a difference between leadership and management?
I think most definitely so. To your point, I think you're right on the mark there. I think management, in my experience, and of course, I grew through management, and of course, all leaders have to also manage, right, and balance the how much time they spend in managing versus leading. But management is more focused on the task, where I see leadership is focused on the people, that is, the teams. Leaders establish the vision and the mission. Leaders are change agents. They take risk. They think about long-term strategy. Leaders coach. They build relationship. They create followers. Whereas managers tend to set goals. They keep the status quo or try to keep the things on track. They control risk. They tend to think shorter term, tactical. They direct, they build, managers really build systems and processes and have employees, where leaders build relationships.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. So before we go, I guess, too far down the path of the listeners thinking that we're, so between the two of us, our collective ages are somewhere around, 250 apparently,
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about just the old school, traditional software testing or testing path. And this is really the only place that this leadership discussion applies. But so I want to make it clear, we're really talking about leadership in the most modern era of what's going on out there in terms of software quality. And so I want to
Correct.
specifically ask you, what does leadership look like in the age of Agile and DevOps? And the reason why I mention those specifically is as I see questions on various forums, I can see, I don't know if it's a questioning or maybe even a little bit of an anxiety among testers who wonder, where do I fit in this broader picture, and how can I become that leader? What's my path, there? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, given the fact I'm 102 and you're 98 and I'm ahead of you, I actually had to, roll through and learn to navigate my way through from waterfall. I mean, I spent early in my career, the first couple of decades of my career were certainly, waterfall. And so what I had to learn is that as we move through Agile and DevOps and navigate our way through that transformation, I had to totally rethink my mindset, my mental models. And as a result, lots of words that begin with C came to mind. And I think, there's lots of C words for those in leadership or aspiring to be great leaders in the context of Agile and DevOps. Whether that's in testing, whether it's in development, whether it's in some architecture, business analyst role, operations role, whatever. But, customer client being first, being creative, that is being innovative in problem solving, being collaborative, that whole team accountability, being concise, delivering just enough, just in time, being cohesive, all parts of the organization working together for one common purpose. Community, embracing all the internal departments and working across departments, but also quite often now in delivering value to clients, we have to embrace external partners and stakeholders because we can't do it all. Another C word is continuous, right? Continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, continuous testing, collective, that systems thinking, thinking start to finish from the time the customer requests a piece of value, from the time that piece of value is delivered. Consensus, alignment of the teams on the end in mind. And then this word chain comes to mind, as in value chain or value stream, taking that systems view. So I'm sure there's other words, but there's a whole list of C words, I think, now those aspiring to leadership need to embrace in the way of Agile and DevOps.
Yeah, I saw an interesting collection of responses to not necessarily about leadership. I think it plays in, but someone was asking what is the the most important quality in a tester, and again it was that C word, communication.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's
right.
that's a big one too. I love the whole C word concept there because it seems to capture a lot of the key elements.
Right. That's a great ad.
So in your experience, there are a lot of things that you can focus on as a leader in technology today. What are some of the key challenges? What are some of the key challenges, particularly in quality and test for a leader in technology today?
Well, as you know, Dave, and you and I have had this conversation, and I know you stay in tune, with the marketplace and your readership and your listenership, and keep a pulse on what organizations are asking for and what challenges that both individuals and teams are having. But job roles and job responsibilities and accountabilities are changing as companies embrace Agile and DevOps. The cultural implementations of Agile and DevOps vary widely with the context of each company's goals, their context, their market, their customers, their competitors. The roadmaps for transformation are very, very diverse. I mean, just like in waterfall, we didn't implement one version of waterfall, nor are we implementing one particular version or approach of Agile or DevOps. We take those key principles and values and we adapt them, right? So for quality and test leaders, I think the first challenge is understanding the landscape, kind of reading the tea leaves, if you will, right? And then the second is asking yourself if you're personally ready for the change. You got to look within, right? And I've worked with some aspiring leaders that just say, look, I'm not ready for that degree of change. I don't want to go there, right, for one reason or another, right? But once the decision is made to move forward, then we've got to embrace many of those C words that you and I just mentioned. And then pragmatically, I think for quality and test leaders, as well as for their teams, roles and accountabilities change. And some examples of that is that a QA and test leader takes on more of an advisory role in the context of Agile and DevOps. He or she has to broaden their scope to understand, participate, and contribute to the entire value stream, as I said earlier, from customer request to delivery. We as QA and test leaders, by definition, have to continue to embrace learning and understanding new technology. We're being asked to become much more technical, right, than we were in the past. We've got to move away from that policing or that gatekeeper approach that some have had in place. And then lead your teams to do the same, to develop other leaders. Usually what we have to do here as we take on this transformation is invest in reskilling. That is, first of all, training ourselves and then training our teams in areas such as Agile, DevOps, automation, security, and so forth. And I think you mentioned you were keeping an eye on what the marketplace was demanding. I would appreciate you retelling that story.
Yeah. So just for context, so I do try to monitor the job postings that are out there on a regular basis to make sure that that from ASTQB standpoint and software testing certification, that it's addressing the correct skills and whatnot. And so I recently, and this is not untypical, but I saw a job requirement that said at least 3 years of progressive experience is required in the validation of software systems. But then it went on to say advanced level test analyst or advanced level technical test analyst ISTQB certification can substitute for this experience. And I thought that was a a very important and powerful point, because the question I see out there, especially among those who are just getting into the field, is, gee, how do I get the job if I don't have experience? But
right.
As quickly as technology is moving, if you want to be a leader out there, it's very difficult to lead when you don't have either the experience or the knowledge. And so I thought, this is a real recognition in the marketplace that having, validated yourself with ISTQB certification is very helpful. You know better than I out there what's going on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that example really reinforces some of the things I just said about, some of those examples of how leaders need to view themselves, differently. The key challenge is really in transforming yourself and your organization to embrace the new cultures of Agile and DevOps.
Yeah, I should note, especially as you speak about Agile, that same company had a job posting for an entry-level software testing position, and their requirement for that, where they were asking for a year of experience or ISTQB foundation level plus ISTQB Agile certification. So, and they said again that could replace the 1 year of experience in software testing. So, yeah, very very interesting out there. And I think things move too quickly to expect that everyone will have experience. And the question is, how do they get that knowledge? So,
exactly.
Yeah. So what is your advice in moving from a direct contributor role in those teams, in those environments to a leadership role? How do you move from a direct contributor role to a leadership role?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to learn that, Dave. Over time, just through experimentation, obviously failing and learning and trying different things. But in the end, kind of circling back to that personal leadership statement that I've been evolving over the last decade, I find that professional success is about relationships, responsiveness, and results. Uh, and so I've tried to uh, develop my leadership capability based on those three legs of the stool, if you will: relationships, responsiveness, and results.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've learned through both failures and successes that a leader must focus on at least these three dimensions pretty much daily, right? Secondly, recruit a few good mentors. And as I said, I've had some great mentors, some not so good mentors, but mostly the privilege of having some really great mentors. People who I aspire to, who I view as great leaders. And then be willing to experiment. Get feedback. Sort of the agile way: fail fast and learn.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Back to my CIO story, just reflecting, writing it down, and then refining it, doing a little journaling, and then evolving your own definition of leadership really helped me. So I think, leaders or aspiring leaders you have to pave your own path. You don't want to try to replicate the style of some other leader. They can be a model for you, but in the end, you have to develop, your own style. And then probably the most important thing I learned was just do it. I mean, no one's going to knight you a leader. I remember going to my managers, one of my managers early in my very naive career of wanting to take on more responsibility. And I say, if you would only give me the title of manager, people would respect me, they would follow me, they would listen to me, right? How wrong that was, right? Right.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
was so very, very wrong, right? I mean, you have to earn your credibility, right? Which is why I tried to center, on those three legs of the stool. I learned, okay, professional life, probably personal life too, is about relationships, responsiveness, and results. And everyone around you are your customers, your peers, people that work for you, people you work for, your clients, your customers. You have to view everyone that interacts with you as a customer.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very similar experience when I was at Procter and Gamble. I remember reading a kind of a path to progression to leadership that had been written up, and it essentially said, if you want to make it to the next level in leadership, you need to be doing that job at your current level. And
Mm-hmm.
it mystified me when I first got there. It didn't make any sense. How am I supposed to do the next job when I'm at this job? But as you said,
Mm-hmm.
it's just do it. Go build that capacity. Go build those skills and gain that respect. And when you have shown that you are worthy of that, then the title will just kind of follow at that point.
Yeah, and it takes some assertiveness and some confidence building and so forth. But if you just begin to act like a leader, I mean, in my view, it doesn't matter whether you're a practitioner, an individual contributor, someone with a big title that has a big organization. Uh, you can demonstrate leadership qualities. I mean, many of us, all of us, have sat in the room with someone that just, I mean, they get up and they start leading, right?
Mm-hmm.
They start championing things towards success and the desired end in mind. and they may not have the big title, but they're capable of doing it.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit specifics here. I mentioned certifications a little bit before, and I know that for example, there's a test manager type of certification that ISTQB offers, but we've had some discussions that with DevOps and Agile and continuous improvement and the quality scenarios that are out there, there's not necessarily a desire or a need in all cases to go down that test manager track if you want to be a leader in these teams. You had mentioned automation, for example. So is something, like test automation important in terms of certifications that people should consider? What do you think is important out there? I know, for example, there are additional specialty certifications, real skill focused areas of performance and usability and model based testing. Um, what do you recommend out there from your background in education and when you're talking to people?
Yeah, and again, I always anchor back to, it is context specific. So we really can't prescribe or predict what an individual, a team, or one organization needs over another. But
Hmm.
I always like to think about the concept of a roadmap and learning journeys. One of the things we're keen on is working with individuals, teams, and organizations to understand where they are, understand where they want to be, and then to actually map out the learning journeys. And that may involve a variety of skill-based training, both on the soft side as well as the hard side, the fundamentals, the advanced courses, and the expert courses. But you want to map that out, right? You say, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. Now then, how do I get there? Uh, the other part, I think that certifications help you demonstrate that you can understand, you can analyze, and you can apply both foundational, advanced, and expert knowledge, on a given topic, right, to your point. But from there, you've got to practice, 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 and you have to use what you learned and the refinement of what you learned back to that delivering results.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I always like the formal courses such as are offered by ISTQB, ASTQB, and other certification providers as that initial knowledge transfer to frame up new approaches, concepts, techniques, and so forth. But then you actually have to experiment with those real time on projects to internalize what that means and be able to modify those and customize those to deliver results for your organization.
Right. There's nothing like getting out there and getting in the trenches and actually doing it, and really evolving. And I think that's a lot of what makes for a good leader is that I think there's always a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of fear, but they get out there and they do that. They learn, they evolve. You've mentioned the word fail more than once in our conversation, and I think that great leaders are not afraid to fail occasionally because they know
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the path toward progress.
Yeah, and we've sort of framed that as hands-on immersive learning, right? I mean, I personally learn best when I hear it, I see it, and then I experience it. I try it, right? And hey, it doesn't work all the time. Therefore, I learned, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you one of the interesting trends. So I'm kind of a big data geek when it comes to just understanding what's going on in the marketplace and whatnot. And so a couple of parts of context here. One, I've been reading in terms of some perspectives from large 4-year undergraduate research-oriented universities, in that when the economy is good, and the economy's been very good for a number of
Mm-hmm.
years now, unemployment's very low, that
Yep.
educational attainment decreases because everyone essentially says, you know what, I've got a job. I don't need to worry
Mm-hmm.
about getting additional information right now. On the other hand, when the economy goes down, and we're going to be talking about this in an upcoming newsletter, where when the economy goes down, the educational attainment goes way up because people realize, I've either been laid off or I'm afraid of being laid
Mm-hmm.
off, and so I need to build those. But the thing that I've noticed uh, is that over the past several months, despite the fact that the economy is quite good, unemployment is at historically low levels, that the number of advanced certifications being taken through exams has
Mm-hmm.
really started to go up, and I
Mm-hmm.
think, I think there's a recognition out there that, you know what, I have a job and I am doing fine, but I think there's a desire and an appreciation for the fact that technology is moving so quickly that
Right.
just being at the foundational level is probably not going to be useful in terms of my career and my path toward leadership. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but
Mm-hmm.
does the concept make sense there?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing much more. In fact, just over this last year, people seeking out advanced and expert learning, whether it be through ISTQB, ASTQB, or other certifications. We're also seeing people wanting to embrace workshops from an advanced or expert perspective. For instance, a lot of interest in our Agile leadership workshops, our DevOps, leadership workshops,
Hmm.
because leadership is, as you know, is about moving an organization from your current state to some future desired state, right? Ultimately, and so there's a lot of transformation, going on, and I think that's driving that as well, Dave.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So great information in the course of this discussion. I want to focus as we kind of conclude here, um, on taking these principles and coalescing them down to some concrete steps in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what. So I'm a listener, and I want to be a leader, and I aspire, and I think I've got a lot of the qualities that you talked about. The question that I would have is, what concrete steps should I take right now toward moving to being a leader, or a better leader if I'm already a leader? And I guess what I'm looking for is, what should I do specifically over
Mm-hmm.
the next few weeks, or when tomorrow, or over the next, for the rest of the year. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, what I found, if I'm sure all the listeners are just as busy as you and I are. I learned that I had to get the investment in my career on my calendar as step one, right? So I actually had to set time aside, because otherwise it fills up with all the other to-dos, that we have. So for me personally, step one is like set time aside, and I mean calendar that time, because if you don't calendar that time, you're probably not going to get it.
Yeah,
So even when you calendar it, somebody takes it away from you, right?
right. No, that's a great piece of advice.
Right. So for me, step one was got to get it on my calendar, and so I set minimally 30 minutes aside each week to just sort of reflect, think, where am I as a leader? What should I be thinking about as um, experimenting, as learning, getting feedback from my peers, my manager, and other people on my leadership. Uh, you know, putting that on your calendar. In the context of that, evaluate your current skills as a leader. As I said earlier, look for and recruit at least one mentor if you don't have one, or a couple more if you already have one. Enroll in training, right, to help you close those gaps. As you said earlier, Dave, I mean, companies are asking for these things, right? Mm-hmm. I'm always happy to have a conversation with anyone, that's an aspiring leader, to help them formulate a plan. So they can certainly contact me. And then we also have something called the TechWell Hub. And you can join that TechWell Hub. We can send out information with this podcast if you like. But within that, it's a Slack channel. And within that Slack channel is something called Test Leadership. It's a Test Leadership channel. So joining the TechWell Hub and then joining the Test Leadership channel is a great way to interact and exchange questions and information with other test leaders that are maybe challenged with the same leadership journeys.
No, those are some great next steps, and I the calendar one, when you first started mentioning that, I was thinking, oh, as a principal, like, yeah, I need to get that on my calendar. And then you made it very clear. No, literally, this is not a put it on my project list. It's block out the time.
Yes.
And I thought that was that brilliant extra touch that brings it to reality, that it'll actually get done. And that was great insight.
Yeah, it doesn't get done unless for me. I mean, I don't know about other people, but for me, it doesn't get done if it's not on my calendar.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. All right. So, great thoughts here. I want to thank you again for your time. And, in terms of next steps, yeah, if anyone in the audience, and it's not always that we get a speaker who is already incredibly busy, inviting people to follow up with him or her. So I greatly appreciate you're making yourself available for those conversations with the listeners, and we'll go ahead and make some contact available through the registration form. But do you have an email address that maybe they could contact you at, or how would you like people to reach you if they do have additional questions?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Michael Sowers, SOWERS, at Coveros, COVEROS.com.
Okay. Can you repeat that one more time for people that can't write that fast?
Yeah, Michael, MICHAEL .Sowers, SOWERS, at Coveros, COVEROS.com.
No, that's great. So, again, Mike, thank you for taking time. I hope we get a chance to talk with you again in the future. It's always a delight. I always love your insights, and I think I suspect there's more than one person in the audience who will be listening to this that, if they follow your steps, will find themselves moving into those leadership roles, because what you've offered is the advice that I think everyone needs. It doesn't always get, depending on their organization. So this is truly valuable information.
Well, I always enjoy our conversations, Dave, and in particular, I'm passionate about leadership. I struggle to become a leader, like everyone else does, and it takes investment, it takes effort, and it takes having some great advisors, right? If you will. So I'm passionate about this topic, and I would just repeat again that in my view, leaders champion teams toward a common purpose, stellar results, and shared rewards. That's just sort of the personal definition of leadership that I have evolved. But I think every individual aspiring leader has to frame what they mean by leadership and their definition of leadership on their own, right? And then live it out. John F. Kennedy said, "Hey, look, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other," right? And that's a lot about what we've talked about here. You know, you've got to lead, but you've got to learn. You got to lead, but you've got to learn.
Yeah, that powerful stuff. So again, thank you, Mike, and I want to thank the audience for joining us today, and we look forward to future podcasts on this and other related subjects. So we hope you look for additional podcasts and can join us in the future.
All right, Dave, take care.
Thanks, Mike.